Welcome to the Super Subs with
Andrew
and Harry, where we talk about anything and everything related to football. So on today's episode, Andrew and I will be talking about something called getting sacked and managers. So if you haven't heard of the word getting sacked or the phrase getting sacked or even the word manager in relation to football or soccer, a manager is pretty much a coach or a head coach in terms of if you watch American sports. And getting sacked will actually explain the full origin of this phrase, but it just means getting fired from your job as the manager or the head coach. So our episode's name is Why Do Managers Get Sacked? So before we continue and go down this trail and topic, Andrew, what are you drinking tonight? How's your weekend going so far?
Weekend is good. Finishing up graduate school finals and celebrating
nice.
with just some red wine. Nothing. I'm no snob. It's very basic, but does the trick. How about yourself?
Red wine's always good. I find myself gravitating towards red in some occasions for sure, especially the dessert wine, like the port wine.
Oh yeah.
I do like myself a nice white wine at a lot of the times, just because of that lightness. And I feel like in terms of how I feel afterwards, I also get more headaches after red wine. I don't know if it's just a psychological thing, but it's
Sulfates,
almost the tannins,
maybe?
the sulfates, drying, like how full-bodied it is. I don't know. I mean, what's your experience with red wine versus white?
Yeah, I occasionally, I tend to definitely drift more towards red. Especially with some of the dishes I like, but
Nice.
I'm not picky, to be honest.
There we go. Well, I am not drinking wine tonight, but I am drinking what looks like a cocktail, but is not a cocktail. It's called a Mojito. So it is by Spindrift.
Ooh.
And if you could see, if you're watching the podcast via YouTube in the camera, I am putting up the can. It's called Mojito from Spindrift. It's a sparkling water drink. The flavor is Mojito because it's taking after Mojito, the alcoholic cocktail, but it is a non-alcoholic bevy, and it has lime and mint in it. So it's a mixture of lime and mint in this the sparkling water. So it's actually really good, and it tastes very similar to a Mojito.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Refreshing.
So next time I'll have to get another pack and share it with you, Andrew, when we do the pod.
Let's do it.
Well, let's get into it. So why do managers get sacked? Before we get into the why, let's get into the what. So Andrew, talk a little bit about what getting sacked in football actually means in terms of being a manager.
So getting sacked is essentially, there are so many different ways of putting it. It's getting the boot. It's essentially just getting fired.
Yeah.
So, sacked is you're fired. And it's funny because we looked up the etymology of the word and we were like, where does that come from? So in the olden times, actually, a lot of people worked contract positions, especially during the Industrial Revolution. So you could be fired at will at any given time. And so if you were fired, you were given a sack from your employer, and it meant that you were fired and you had to pack up all your stuff. So that's where we get the term sacked.
It's incredible.
There's a lot of really relevant. It's awesome. And it's such a buzzword right now. We have most recently Patrick Vieira, who's a former Arsenal player and was formerly the manager of Crystal Palace in the English Premier League. Just got fired this past week. And also some other notable folks. Frank Lampard got fired from Everton this past season. Steven Gerrard from Aston Villa. Thomas Tuchel from Chelsea, which came as a big surprise to a lot of people because Chelsea had, in recent history, won the Champions League, which is Europe's biggest title for club football. So all of that to be said, it just means you're getting fired. So, yeah, exactly. So, Harry, can you walk us through the average tenure of a manager? So I talked a little bit about some of these famous managers that have gotten fired recently, what it means to be fired. So what does the average tenure look like in football?
Yeah, so in the Premier League specifically, it might differ in other leagues. It might be longer or shorter. Usually it is, I would say, longer because there's a lot of pressure in the highest leagues, especially the Premier League, playing at such a high level with so much money involved. The owners and the investors want to make sure that their money is being rewarded with results and with accolades and trophies and things like that. So according to a study by the LMA, which is the League Managers Association, I'm not sure what year this was, but the average length of time that a manager is in his or her position at the club, and usually I don't think we've yet to see a female manager. I'd love to see a female manager at a Premier League club.
Definitely.
For coaching a men's Premier League team, but usually it's a male. The average length of time they spend at a Premier League club is literally just over a season and a half, which is 17 months, about 17 months. That's not long at all. Imagine if every job that you had, you'd only stay there for about a year and a half, or less than a year and a half. It's about a year and 5 months, right? So, and then you knew you were getting fired at the 17-month mark. Wouldn't you be shaking your boots a little bit? I absolutely would. So the reason the reason that this happens is usually because, and we'll get into a little bit about it, but usually it's just because professional football, especially the Premier League, especially La Liga, Bundesliga, the Spanish, German, the Italian League, Serie A, French League, Ligue 1, all of them are so competitive and results driven. So all the owners, investors, and the staff at the club, the board of directors at every single club, there's usually a board, etc. They look at the results for every month, every week, every year, every season, every half season, and they take a look at how it's trending. And really, if the team's performance is going downhill, if the financial results are going downhill because of it, if they can't market the players because the team is in dead last for the season and they're losing followers, they're losing this, they're losing that, usually the managers are a lever that the ownership and the board can pull, because they think, oh, if a new manager comes in, there's a lot of things that can change. The staff can change, the psychology of the players can change, and ultimately that could lead to an upshoot in the team's performance. So usually, though, the number one reason is because of team performance and losses, draws, or just not getting to where they want to be. So there's another variety of reasons. So there's the whole list of reasons that also come with, besides the results. So some of those could be losing matches, the performance-related ones, losing matches, failing to achieve goals, such as getting to a semifinal. So if you're a listener out there and you have a little bit more experience with football, maybe you've played a game called Football Manager. It's a pretty much a simulation-based game on your favorite console or on PC, and you can pretend to be a football manager. And oftentimes at clubs, the board will set a goal for the season. So before the season starts, and this happens at most every football club that you follow that's professional, what are the goals for the season? We want to make top 4. We want to get to Champions League. We want to get to a semifinal. We want to win a cup. We want to have X amount of maybe goals scored, or we want to keep X amount of clean sheets. All of those things, if the results aren't met, that could also mean the manager being sacked. Oftentimes, other reasons could include maybe the manager doesn't have a good relationship with the players. So Thomas Tuchel, he famously had falling outs with a lot of players when he was at Paris Saint-Germain, when he was coaching in France. And he didn't get along with these star players and couldn't manage their personalities. That's one reason. Maybe another reason, the manager doesn't get along with the ownership or the board. Very recently, just yesterday or the day before, a manager called Antonio Conte from Tottenham Hotspurs, he actually gave a fiery press conference saying that the team's bad performances lately are just the history of what the club's been for the last 20 years, and this is systemic of the ownership and not him. So he literally took pot shots at the owners, and it doesn't bode well for his job. He's probably going to be out of a job soon and get the sack. So all of these things can come together and really affect the manager's position at the club, and ultimately the club is going to dismiss the manager and give him the sack, usually him or her, to bring in a new manager with a new vision, a new approach, new philosophy, and the decision usually to make the sack is made by the club's board or the club's ownership. So, Andrew, let's talk about what happens after a manager gets sacked and a new manager comes in. So there's this phenomenon that you'll talk about and you'll describe to the listener. What usually happens, or what can happen when a manager comes in to a club after the previous manager is sacked?
So there's a fun term, and I always really enjoy the term, but it's called a new manager bounce.
Ooh, sounds fun and exciting.
It's in a lot of ways, it's like a rebound. So a lot of clubs, you see this all across Europe and the world, clubs are said to enjoy a new manager bounce when they appoint a new boss. So fresh face comes in, the slate is wiped clean.
Okay.
Like you said, oftentimes there's a lot of staffing changes. Players are then motivated to give their all. Maybe that they can try to win, more playing time, change things up.
That makes sense.
And then because of that, they have this newfound rejuvenation to perform well. So you see, it's not unusual to see teams with new managers actually start performing well, very soon after. So, and all that to be said, managers can't right the ship instantly. A lot of projects and a lot of big teams will take years and years of investment, money spent on players, new facilities, things like that. But with a new man at the helm, it is an opportunity for teams to right the ship, in little ways. Yeah. But for the most part, a manager is sacked when the team is playing poorly. So some examples we've seen, in recent years, you have Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I always mess up his name.
It's a tough name, but
I shouldn't. He's
a man. You gave it a great shot.
I gave it a great shot. Yeah. No bounce here for that one. But he was famously sacked after 5 defeats in 7 league games. Aston Villa had gone 5 games without a win when Smith was shown the door. Norwich were at the bottom of the table when Daniel Farke was given his marching orders. And, even Nuno Espirito Santo was, famously the coach of Tottenham Hotspur, who we just talked about, for not very long, actually. And when his team couldn't even get a shot on target on goal, or win, he was shown the door. So, the bounce is the hope that with, new blood comes new life, and that when the new manager is appointed, the hope is that things can't get any worse, right? That, things are changing. People at the higher levels of the club want the team to rebound. So a lot of times the players get on board, the fans get on board, the energy is just more positive. And from that, you see better results. So Harry, you've got an example that you wanted to share regarding our favorite club, Manchester United, and some of the new manager bounce that we've seen at our club recently.
Absolutely. So new manager bounce usually means the moment that a new manager comes in, when the old manager is sacked, you'll see results right away. Wins, or draws. At least more points usually on average than when the old manager was there. So I wanted to give an example of when that's not always the case, I would say, but when really having a manager for the long term matters more than the short term. So I'll give a little bit of context to you as a listener. So if you're not familiar with Manchester United, it's a very big football club, probably the biggest of all time. We're biased, but the manager for a while was a player of the club previously that Andrew just named, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and he took charge of the club after some pretty results that weren't representative of the club's stature over the past 10 years, I would say 7-10 years. And he was trying to get it back to the limelight. But in the dying embers of his tenure, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's tenure at Manchester United, like Andrew said, he had lost, 5 games in 7. So 5 and 7 were all losses, which is unheard of for a top team in the top league. So he got the boot, and there were 2 managers that came in. One's called Ralph Rangnick, and then one who is the current manager today is called Erik ten Hag. So Ralph Rangnick was the interim manager, so he was just the quote-unquote caretaker manager. He was just there to transition to this new manager. And Erik ten Hag is a manager that was touted by all the clubs in Europe as one of the best managers, just in terms of his previous club, Ajax, the top club in the Dutch Eredivisie league. And his coaching style was attacking, very exciting football, results oriented. He won the league, he won the league cups, etc. So very exciting manager. The first actual league game that he managed with Manchester United, the first 2 league games, he got blown out of the water. So there was no new manager bounce here. And the reason I want to bring this up is because new manager bounces often happen because of a psychological shift in the team. Yep. Such as Andrew said, a new manager comes in, it's a fresh face, you want to impress the manager. When Erik ten Hag came in and was trying to set a new philosophy and a new playing style, it was over the summer. So what had happened is there was not really an immediate psychological shift. It was more of a slow cultural shift. And ultimately, when a quality manager comes in, you can tell if they're good or bad if you look at long-term results. A new manager bounce is usually not as useful to look at, even though it's exciting if you're winning the next 5 games because a new person just comes in. Usually it's a regression to the means. And what I mean by that is if a team's player, like if let's say you have a bunch of players on a team and their quality is usually up here, but the results are here lately. And on YouTube, I'm gesturing with my hands, but if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, usually a team's players' qualities are higher than the results they're getting. If a new manager comes in, usually players will play more up to their quality, and that means the results will be better, points will be gained, etc. But over a long term, what a new manager should be doing is setting the tactics, the philosophy, even the culture at a club in terms of showing up on time to team meetings, being professional in terms of interviews. All of those things are set by the manager of a club. And a new manager bounce can be nice, but ultimately what matters are the results in the end, and the culture of the club, and then the dressing room, how the team gets along. All those things matter so much. So now that we talked about the new manager bounce and why an old manager can get the sack, Andrew, let's talk a little bit about stats or longest and shortest time in seat for some managers. So Andrew, why don't you go through some times and statistics about managers that have been in the Premier League or just in general?
So it's funny that you ended that last segment with Erik ten Hag, because I'm going to start off this segment with Sir Alex Ferguson, or Fergie, as he is affectionately known amongst Manchester United supporters. I don't have stats for every league across Europe, but Fergie served as a manager for Manchester United for 27 years, which I think across any league in Europe is pretty darn impressive.
Really good.
He was the club's head coach from 1986 to 2013. So, like I said, 27 years. So, when we think about that 17-month average tenure, this blows it out of the water.
Oh, yeah.
During his time, he won 13 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, 2 UEFA Champions Leagues, a FIFA World Cup, and more. Absolutely incredible.
Wow.
And, when we think about the legacy of a manager, I mean, he still shows up to games, which is incredible. To have a manager love the club that much, it is pretty special. But on the other end of the spectrum, one of the shortest ever tenures was this guy by the name of Les Reed. He was only in charge of Charlton Athletic for 40 days. They did terribly. They flopped out of the League Cup. They lost to a team called Wycombe, and he was just way out of his league. And actually the press, because of his sullen demeanor, nicknamed him Les Miserables, which I think is just classic British press humor.
Of course,
they can be absolutely relentless.
Yeah.
But even shorter than 40 days, there is this story about a man by the name of Leroy Rossignol. I might be mispronouncing that. My apologies, Leroy.
That's okay.
He was appointed the manager of Torquay United between 2002 and 2006. And he led them to a League One promotion. And on the 17th of May,
promotion.
Yeah, anytime you're leading a club to a promotion, that's a pretty good thing. On May 17th of 2007, the former West Ham striker was reappointed following the dismissal of Keith Curle. What's interesting is that on his first day of work, he only got 10 minutes in before he was sacked. And unfortunately, it's heartbreaking, but it's not his fault, So behind the scenes, while he was being appointed and starting his first day, the club was actually going through ownership changes. So Harry, you talked a bit about what can drive managers to be sacked, and a lot of it is the management, upper level management, and the ownership. So wasn't his fault. The ownership decided to go a different way, sacked him on his first day at the job, and that was his tenure. I think if there's any job where you're getting fired after 10 minutes, I would have to say you're doing something very wrong. But I think in this guy's case, I don't know him, but I think he just got bad luck.
The worst luck. I mean, there's not many jobs you can get fired from or get the sack from after 10 minutes. I would assume really the only ones, if let's say you leak a top government secret, maybe that's like, oh, you're a goner. But 10 minutes in, you don't even know how to do anything. That's, but no. Obviously Leroy, sorry, Leroy. If you're out there, if you're listening to this podcast, Leroy, we offer our greatest condolences to your second tenure at Torquay United. But yeah, so I'll give a few final thoughts on really the sacking of managers and the whole tenureship of managers in terms of clubs in general. And then, Andrew, I'd love to hear your final thoughts and we can close out. So in my opinion, this is my opinion, solely my opinion, not some kind of stated fact in football in general. I think managers just don't get enough time at clubs nowadays. So if you think about the 17-month tenure, imagine getting fired from your job every 17 months. It's just, and it's coming, the sacking is coming or the firing is coming. It's just not enough time to do your job properly, whether it's to insert your philosophy, whether it's to get the players on side, whether it's maybe there were huge issues at the club before and you needed to steer that ship in the right direction and you're not getting the time to do that, whether it's getting to know the club's staff, the club's owners, the history behind the club and really feel that and put that on the pitch. There's so many elements of being a coach, and a manager has so many responsibilities other than just coaching the team of 11 players in the field or 25, 26 members of the first team. There's so many more things. So really, in the end, it comes down to what we talked about early on in the pod, which is results. So results steer the way for managers getting sacked, and ultimately results are linked to the finances of a club. And it's unfortunate to talk about, but if you don't get results, you don't get money. And if you don't get money, the owners and investors are angry, and thus they will try to do something, which includes sacking a manager, to change that. And, there's all kinds of things that happen when we don't get results, such as players maybe aren't as lucrative in terms of marketing your club. The fans don't buy as many tickets. There's not as many season ticket holders. So all kinds of financial implications. Obviously, if I was in the owner's position, I would not want to do the same thing. I would want to give the managers more time. But then again, I'm not a football club owner. And if I was, maybe we would hire someone to do our podcast for us because we would have so much money. But with that, Andrew, I'd love to hear your final thoughts before we close out for today.
Yeah, I guess my closing thoughts are, kind of piggybacking off of what you said, just giving managers a shot. I think it is really pretty special when you see the stars align and where a manager is given the time to grow, to get the resources, the players, the coaching staff that they want. And I think a big example, and it pains me to say this, but is Mikel Arteta from Arsenal. Mm-hmm. They're having an incredible season this year, leading the Premier League right now, above Man City and the whole rest of the table. But Mikel Arteta, when he started out, he struggled. I mean, they did not get the results that they were looking for. Yep. There was a lot of questions about, is he really the right guy for the job? And it's just an example of when you stick with someone and you invest into their philosophy and their tactics and you let them grow, you can see a lot of really good gains that go even beyond that new manager bounce. So something to look out for. We'll see, what other managers get that time and how it works out for them.
Absolutely. And one thing to say here, conversely to the point of it's not the best thing that managers get sacked. What does come with manager sackings are there is some drama infused in that, obviously. So when you think about managers getting the sack, what happens to the dressing room? What happens to the players? Everything's in chaos. And if you're a neutral or if you don't support necessarily the club that's sacking their manager, it could be very entertaining to watch. So I'll leave you as the viewer or the listener with that. So that was today's episode of the Super Subs with
Andrew
and Harry. Definitely don't miss our next episode. We're actually going to talk about everything related to penalty kicks. So what is a penalty kick? When you get a penalty kick rewarded to your team, what happens during a penalty kick? What are the rules? Can you touch it with your head, then your foot, and then your elbow, and then throw it in? No, that's the short answer. But what are some other interesting historical points, and how was the penalty kick created? Who did that? All of those things and some key fun facts and statistics we'll talk about in our next episode. Definitely don't miss it. But that was today's episode of Why Do Managers Get Sacked? This was the Super Subs podcast. We are subbing out for now. Catch you on the next one.